burning issue of electoral reform in Guyana. Any doubts about the urgent need for electoral reform in Guyana must surely have been dispelled by the political quagmire surrounding the general and regional elections of March 2020. These elections have been marred by the whole chain of events. For example, 2 months after the elections and the winner has not been declared, court challenges and dispute after dispute, count and recount, allegations of fraud, ballot box vigils, the threat of the country descending into violence and chaos, condemnation and threats of repercussions by foreign governments, the indignity of our neighbors being called upon to intervene in our election process, as if after 50 years we are not capable of managing an election process which should be routine by now. Outbursts of hate-filled ethnic verbal attacks on social media. I believe that this shameful behavior is the work of an ignorant, misguided minority and not representative of the nation as a whole. Still, I'm disappointed that political leaders have not condemned it in the strongest terms and taken a stand for reason and tolerance. All these events are unprecedented elsewhere in the Caribbean and are a shameful reflection on our country. This is not the first time this country has had political crisis around elections, and it will not be the last if we don't take urgent action. The question is, can we afford to have this experience of what my late mother would call wrangling and tangling repeated every 5 years? Clearly, the answer is no. This question prompted me to write this book, entitled Electoral System Reform for a Diverse Nation, the Case of Guyana. The book's main message is that A, transformation to a stable, constructive political environment is necessary and attainable, and B, electoral reform holds the key to the achievement of that political transformation. The book is available for purchase in Guyana at Austin Bookstore and at UG Bookstore, at Amazon.com, in paperback and Kindle versions, and through major bookstores worldwide. Commentators typically cast doubt on the attainability of stable governance in Guyana on grounds of ethnic division, or they propose what I consider to be oversimplistic solutions. This book recognizes the ethnic dimension in Guyanese politics. This book starts from the fundamental position that ethnic diversity is a proud, defining feature of Guyanese society to be fostered and celebrated, instead of being treated as an obstacle to progress and a curse. I challenge the popular narrative of this divided nation. I especially resent that people from countries with their own problems of racial intolerance can come to label us as a racially divided nation. I've been accused of naivety for this position, but let me be clear. I recognize that voting in Guyana and politics in general are race-based and revolve around the ethnic competition of the two leading minorities, people of Indian and African descent. I say minorities because neither of these two groups make up more than 50% of the population. Ethnic competition in itself is not unusual anywhere in the world and is not by itself a problem. The problem is an electoral system that reinforces and inflames ethnic polarization and therefore contributes to political dysfunction and national underperformance. The book argues that with political will and a well-conceived process of social dialogue, We can design an electoral system that addresses underlying ethnic insecurities and provides a foundation for good governance and national development. It is clear that Guyana's problems are institutional, having to do with the ways in which we conduct our affairs. We are blessed with a country of natural abundance, so underdevelopment cannot be attributed to lack of resources. Moreover, we spared the worst disasters, such as hurricanes, that our Caribbean neighbors have to put up with frequently. Despite our many advantages, the country languishes constantly in the twilight zone of underdevelopment and instability. For example, this is shown by the fact that in economic terms, Guyana lags behind our neighbors in Latin America and the Caribbean. As the figures for 2016 will show, Guyana was at the bottom of the CARICOM in terms of GDP per capita, with only Haiti having a lower figure. And this can be seen by looking at the graph presented. Another thing to look at, low life expectancy at birth in terms of indicators of Guyana's economic and social position. Life expectancy in Guyana was 66.5 in 2015 compared to a regional average of 74 for Latin America and the Caribbean. Maternal deaths for Guyana are 229 per 100,000 live births in 2015 compared to 68 for Latin America and the Caribbean as an average, excluding Haiti. That is, the Guyana rate is more than 3 times higher than the regional average. Pregnancy and childbirth should not be a virtual death sentence for so many of our women. Infant mortality. The infant mortality rate, we lose 30 infants per 1,000 live births in Guyana compared to less than 17 for most of the Caribbean countries. Emigration. Our emigration rate is among the highest in the world, especially when it comes to the most educated and skilled. When it's the ambition of large numbers of people to leave a country, it means that citizens don't have faith that they can realize their aspirations for themselves and their children in this country. Apart from a debilitating brain drain, it encourages a cycle of disrespect towards Guyanese in other countries. As the saying goes, the grass is growing and the horse is starving. I take no pleasure in bringing up these poor performance indicators, but they highlight the urgency of the situation. Given that our weaknesses are institutional, we need to focus on reforming our institutions. In other words, the rules by which we conduct our affairs. Then there's the oil. All around, expectations are being raised that oil production will transform Guyana's future. Oil production creates opportunity, yes, but is no guarantee of improvement in our livelihoods. It is possible, as has happened in other countries, that while oil production causes glowing growth indicators, the majority of citizens continue to experience no significant improvements in their lives. Oil production makes electoral reform and political transformation more urgent in order to achieve the unity and constructive engagement that is necessary to ensure that Guyanese citizens reap benefits in rising living standards and rising human capacity. What difference will electoral reform make? Well, the political science literature is almost unanimous that electoral system reform is the most powerful instrument of political transformation, the best way to repair a political system in distress. As one political scientist states, electoral reform is, quote, by far the most powerful lever of constitutional engineering for accommodation and harmony in severely divided societies. Now, what are the problems, specific problems with the Guyana electoral system? Guyana has the contradictory combination of proportional representation with plurality. Proportional representation typically promotes inclusive behavior through the need for parties to negotiate and form alliances in order to form the government. The addition of plurality in determining the winner in Guyana's case counteracts the quality of inclusive engagement. And just to explain what we mean by proportional representation, as the name suggests, proportional representation is a system aimed at ensuring that the distribution of seats is in proportion to the numbers of votes obtained by parties. For example, if a party wins 40% of the votes, then that party should get 40% of the seats. Not all systems guarantee that proportionality. What do we mean by plurality? Plurality means that the winner is the party that gets the most seats. It doesn't matter how many seats there are, and it doesn't matter if the number of seats is a minority. Under this system, it's normal for a party to win, even though the majority of people have voted for other parties. So, plurality means that if a party wins 40% of the seats, that party gets the government even as long as it is the party with the highest number of seats. It doesn't matter that that number of seats is not a majority. The plurality provision reintroduces a winner-take-all element which inflames underlying friction and rivalry. It provides incentive for the major parties to mobilize their ethnic bases. It also creates instability by allowing for minority governments. As an associated feature in the Guyana case is the prohibition of parties negotiating alliances to form the government after elections. This too works against a politics of engagement and negotiation. A second weakness of the Guyana system is the lack of accountability. Voters elect lists and not individual candidates. Consequently, there is no individual for citizens to relate to take up grievances with, and make suggestions. Everything points to party loyalty, which is polarizing. Secondly, given the closed list system and the way it works, representatives' first loyalties are to their party leaderships and not to citizens. What we mean by closed list is that you vote for a list of candidates and not for, you don't have any choice in terms of selecting the candidates. You have to vote for the whole list or another list. The party selects the candidates, decides their position on the list, and therefore their chances of getting into the National Assembly. The party can also have them expelled from the National Assembly at any time. So there is total control of the candidates and the representatives by the parties, and therefore the representatives are loyal or to the party rather than the voters. The ethnic dimension undermines accountability also. With people committed to a party on the basis of race, they're not disposed to hold their representatives accountable for performance, and representatives can therefore get away with poor quality representation and policy making. Low accountability leads to poor development outcomes. Lack of accountability gives politicians wide scope for actions related more to political power struggle than development. And there are no penalties for substandard behavior. All this contributes to a political system that is not performance-based. A third weakness of the Guyana system is that the constituency component lacks substance and is completely meaningless. The determination of the overall election outcome is dominated by what we call the national top-up votes, or top-up seats. The constituency aspect has little impact. The one vote for both constituency and national party also restricts the choices available to citizens. Secondly, constituencies are too large to be genuinely representative. Example, what are the chances that the specific interests and concerns of East Bank Demerara residents will be the same as those of East Coast Demerara residents, even though all are part of one constituency, Demerara Mahika? There is also an absence of constituency machinery for representative citizen consultation, which is something that's commonplace in other countries. And fourthly, consequently, politics does not revolve around grassroots interests of citizens. Another weakness of the Guyana system is reduced leverage for small parties. The system diminishes the leverage available to small parties and therefore misses the opportunity for them to be forces of mediation and negotiation. The system and election administration machinery do not go far enough to ensure transparency and build confidence in the integrity of the elections process. And of course, that is the center of the present crisis. The final weakness I would highlight is that the system is intrinsically unstable. Witness the situation of minority government in 2011 to 2015, the failure of the last two governments to run their full terms, and all of the events since December 2018, starting with the no confidence motion. Now, what's the kind of end goal? What end goal would we aim at? An electoral process which all sections of the society find acceptable and the outcome of which all are willing to respect. That would be the main goal. This is essentially a political condition where losers are comfortable enough to accept the outcome. That's the weakness in Guyana. This means, one, we have to address ethnic insecurities, and two, eliminate the winner-take-all element in election outcomes, and three, establish an orientation in favor of constructive party engagement and negotiation. In general, what we want to aim at is a system that people are comfortable with and a system that supports performance-based politics. Now, given those weaknesses in the system, what are some core proposals for reform? And these are the proposals that you'll find in the book. The first one is we would, under a reform system, maintain proportional representation, but with majority provision, with a majority provision instead of plurality for determining the outcome. That is, the winner would be the presidential candidate who has the support of more than 50% of the elected representatives. So the winning candidate who becomes president would therefore be much more of a consensus candidate rather than a sectoral candidate. This candidate would have to have broad-based support. Secondly, this will generate politics of engagement and give all parties more meaningful roles in the system. A second proposal is to provide for constituency voters to elect individual representatives instead of lists of representatives in order to strengthen accountability. Third proposal, strengthen the local orientation and accountability by 1, increasing the proportion of constituency seats relative to national top-up seats. There should be more constituency seats than top-up. At the moment, we have 65 seats in all. There are 25 constituency seats and 40 top-up seats. We want to reverse that and increase, and going along with that, we would want to increase the number of constituencies by breaking up currently large constituencies. So for example, Region 4 could easily be broken up into at least 3 constituencies. A final general proposal would be to give voters more choice by allowing 2 votes per person, one for the constituency representative and the other for the party of choice at the national level. So a voter then has the option of voting for one party in the constituency and then another party at the national level. It's not likely to be done, but at least they have the option. Now, let me say something about power sharing, which is the popular proposal of the day. Numerous responses to the current political situation call for power sharing, essentially some form of unity government based on a PPP-PNC alliance. This is appealing in the circumstances of Guyana, but is at best an interim arrangement. The main drawbacks to this proposal are: 1, it entrenches the existing political structure without addressing the root ethnic insecurities. 2, it exacerbates the lack of accountability. With the main parties forming the government, there would be a lack of effective opposition and scrutiny of the political system. 3, the power sharing proposal do not pay enough attention to the performance dimension. What reason is there to expect that a unity government would perform better in providing policy leadership and improvements for citizens than what we have experienced so far? It would be the same parties, just joined together. Finally, power sharing would not be stable and sustainable in the absence of strong accountability and economic development. If the other factors that make up a good electoral system are absent, power sharing is going to fall apart. I'd like to turn now to some final remarks on what I would call the road to reform, some final general remarks. There is no perfect or ideal electoral system. All systems have advantages and disadvantages. Success in the functioning of the system will require political will across the board. It will call also for visionary government, leadership, comprehensive social dialogue, and negotiation involving all major sectors of the society. Major political parties will inevitably be part of the dialogue process, but must not dominate it. A comprehensive social dialogue on the political system, I should point out, would be a victory in its own right. Through all our difficulties in the level since the 1950s, the one thing we have simply not done is try to simply sit down and negotiate, sit down and dialogue. Electoral reform is not a one-shot, quick-fix process. The country must be in a permanent reform mode as politics and political conditions and realities change. A frequent comment I received in response to this book is that the book's message is relevant and timely, but does not stand a chance of being implemented because the political establishment is not going to support it. This skepticism is understandable given, one, a belief in the inevitability of racial division and tension, two, the experience of the past 70 years that has resulted in a traumatized nation resigned to the decisions of politicians and feeling helpless to make change. And three, the fact that over 70% of the population was born after 1972, resulting in a skewed sense of normalcy. Development and underperformance has come to be accepted as normal. I take heart from a couple of factors that give reason for optimistic hopes in spite of those points. One is the congeniality of everyday life in Guyana. In general, we get along. Not just Indo-Guyanese and Afro-Guyanese, but everybody, all races. That's my experience anyway. Secondly, there are signs of what I would call a widening middle, of people who are fed up with the old politics and national underperformance and want to achieve a constructive politics. It's important for this middle to mobilize and become vocal and proactive. These sentiments are well expressed by Sarah Barrett, a member of the audience at the book launch at the National Library on February 7th.
I want to say to you that I don't feel skeptical about electoral reform. In fact, in 30 years, I see this as being inevitable, and I believe you are correct. The process has already started, and we are seeing the signs of it. And just to answer my friend at the back here, Jerry, hi Jerry, I'm Sarah. How do we do it? I believe you are correct. Support for it will come from the growing middle that we are seeing, and all must be involved. To quote Martin Carty, you are correct. But the will must come from the people, but it must be an effort of the people, an effort involving government, an effort involving civil society, an effort involving private sector, an effort involving an entire nation.
As I've said, the biggest obstacle to change is the huge boulder of skepticism about the possibility of dramatic change in Guyana. We can be inspired by the example of South Africa, where two bitterly opposing sides were able to negotiate a settlement against overwhelming odds. I'm reminded of the words of Mandela when he said, "It always seems impossible until it's done." Thank you for your attention, and I hope you find the book informative and useful. Thank you.